one of the handful of MPs that brought this bill to the House. You can call him the proponent or chief proponent of the anti-LGBTQ bill. Is the Ningo-Prampram Member of Parliament, Samuel Nate George. He's joined us on the line. Honorable George, you're welcome to Eyewitness News.
Hi, good evening, Omar. Good evening to your listener.
So a lot of things have happened over the past 24 hours in relation to this bill of yours that you have before the House. So the U.S. Vice President has spoken, the President of Ghana has spoken, now the number 3 gentleman of the land has also spoken. As a proponent of the bill, what do you make of all these 3 submissions? Do they take away or add anything to your bill as you are presented and are working on since you deployed it some 2 years ago?
Well, I don't see anything being taken away, but I see something being added. I do not see anything. I mean, the comments by Kamala Harris were the expression of an opinion. Opinions are like noses. Everybody has one. Kamala Harris is the last place we will go to for a lecture on human rights. I mean, we say when you want a lecture on morality, you don't go to a brothel. And so the U.S. Vice President is the last person to be giving lectures on human rights. Her record and the record of her government on human rights is appalling and not one that Ghanaians will want to learn anything from. President Akufo-Addo, on the other hand, lost the golden opportunity to take a stand like his predecessors had done to make clear Ghana's unequivocal position on the issues of LGBTQ. He chose to beat around the bush and try to distance himself from the bill and say, oh, it's not my bill, it is a bill by a handful of members. Well, a handful of members have presented this bill and Parliament will pass it and we would demand of him to execute it and sign it into law. So whether he calls it a bill by a handful of persons or not, and whether he tries to distance himself away from it, he's Attorney General, who is the chief legal advisor and basically lawyer to the president in his capacity as president of Ghana. Dr. Dami has contributed to the bill and has eventually given the bill a pass by his standards. So it will suggest that the government's position on the bill is that it supports the bill. So for the president to run away from his own government's position is a worrying and sad spectacle on the international stage. Now, what is added to the bill is what happened today. The comment by the Right Honourable Alban Sumana Kingsford-Bagbin, the fact that he made a bold call and a bold decision that this bill will be passed, and that we are not going to be cowed by the undemocratic comment of the Vice President of America. I mean, the American people should be coming to Ghana to learn a few things from our parliament when it comes to issues of lawmaking, because we would be in a very good position to help them with a private members bill, help their members of Congress, for example, pass legislation on gun control to avoid the senseless killing of innocent children like we saw yesterday, barely 2 hours after Kamala Harris's unsolicited opinion. We saw gun violence that killed 3 young children and 3 teachers in an American school. Gun violence is a human rights issue that should be looked at closely by Kamala Harris and her boss, Joe Biden. And we as Ghanaian Parliament will be willing to help them draft a bill because we see that that's an area in which they lack the expertise. And so for us, and for me as a sponsor and my colleagues sponsors, we are buoyed by the Speaker's reassuring words and the fact that we know that the overwhelming majority of the Ghanaian people, be they Christians, Muslims, or traditionalists, are fully behind this bill. And as president, he must always remember that his fidelity to the 1992 Constitution he swore an oath to uphold, not the opinion of a vice president who comes into another country and behaves in a very hypocritical and undiplomatic manner.
Okay, now the president ultimately is the one who has to put a pen to the bill when it comes to the Jubilee House before it becomes law. Otherwise, it will remain what it is, a bill. Listening to the president adopt a wait-and-see approach, do you get a sense that, and again, listen to what the speaker has said, do you get a sense that if the bill goes before the president, he may not assent to it as is usual and is expected, unless the president has challenges with bills that are brought by the House of Parliament?
Well, again, it's not entirely correct that if we went to him and he didn't sign, that would be the end of it. The president will be requested by Parliament to sign the bill into law. It will be politically suicidal, and it will mark the sound of the death knell on his abysmal governance if he said he was not going to sign that bill into law. I mean, that would be the beginning of the collapse of his government and his legacy. And so I want to hazard that thought, because I think that his advisors and handlers would advise him accordingly. But let's assume that the president, in his usual recalcitrant manner, decided that he wasn't going to sign it into law. What you would then see is that within 6 months, the Constitution gives us the power to bring the bill, after 6 months of it being with the president, if he fails to sign, bring the bill back to Parliament and get parliamentary assent by getting a 2/3 vote on the bill. Don't forget that for the bill to pass, you just need a yes vote or a no vote. And if anybody called for a division, it will be a head count. Now, if that was done and became a bill and went to and the bill was passed by Parliament after the third reading, and the president refused to sign it, after 6 months, we can bring it back to Parliament, and with a 2/3 vote of the House, it will become law. So with the president or without the president, we'll pass this bill. That much I can assure him, because it will be a clear sign to the president that his own MPs will break ranks with him.
I see, but people also are interpreting the comment by the vice president of the US to mean that we are being, cajoled in a way to agree to have LGBTQ rights in Ghana, because listening to the vice president, she sounded very sure of her position. She says a human right that ought to be agreed with. Is your bill opposed to the rights of LGBTQI people in Ghana? Is that your position? Is that what you have in that document? Because we are again told that the bill has been, for want of a better word, sanitized by the Attorney General. Has that taken care of all the issues that may arise, that may put us in the light that Uganda has been put in now following the passage of that bill and the assent to same?
First and foremost, the president's comment that the bill has been sanitized by the Attorney General shows that the president is not on top of the job. He's not on top of his brief. Because when the Attorney General met with the committee, that meeting lasted less than an hour, because everything the Attorney General had raised in his memo had already been dealt with by the committee and members of the sponsors of the bill. So when the Attorney General came, every issue he raised, he just told him, look, we've dealt with this, and this is how we've dealt with it. And he says, I'm comfortable with it. So it was less than an hour's meeting. So the Attorney General did not sensitize the bill. The Parliament Committee on Constitutional, Legal and Parliamentary Affairs worked with the sponsors to streamline the bill. The object and intent of the bill have not changed. All the critical issues we put in there remain there. The issues of legislative drafting that were taken care of by way of amendment by the committee, and we have respected those and taking them out. And so when the president says the bill has been watered down, the president doesn't know what he's talking about, first and foremost. Then on the issue of whether Kamala Harris was cajoling us, we're in this stage simply because of the recklessness of our own government. I mean, we are literally begging someone to go and beg someone else for us to beg the IMF to give us money. I mean, we're having to beg someone to beg someone to beg someone to give us money. That's where we find ourselves because of the recklessness of our own government. And that's what will give them the temerity. But again, like I said, it's the hypocrisy of the American government. The American government is simply behaving like a coward, like a bully on a school park who looks for weaker people and attacks them. You would have expected that the American government would have taken a tough stand against Qatar during the World Cup, and even taking a stand to say that because the Qataris have a much tougher stance. Don't forget that in our bill, the longest punishment or the stiffest punishment in our bill is 5 years of imprisonment. In Qatar, the punishment, the slightest punishment for homosexuality is death. Death, complete death, not imprisonment, death. Yet the Americans did not find it appropriate to express their misgivings and place sanctions on the Qataris. They actually allowed their male football team to go and play there and ask their citizens to observe Qatari laws whilst in Qatar as supporters. The Americans sell weapons, military hardware to Qatar in excess of $1 billion every year. Is that not hypocrisy? The Americans have the Saudis as one of their biggest trading partners. The Saudis have death as a punishment for homosexuality. Why are they not issuing threats to them? Why are they coming to Africa to try and issue threats here and behave like an overbearing big brother? But again, like I said, it's because of weak leadership. We have put ourselves in this position because of weak leadership. But again, it just smacks of the hypocrisy of the American state and what their so-called foreign policy is.
Moving forward, when next are we going to hear from the House of Parliament on the bill? And what is the expectation, or what are the next steps for a bill that is brought before the House? And this is without prejudice to whether the bill will be passed or not. But what are the next steps?
So the bill is currently, there are 3 stages of a bill. When the bill is presented, after for a private member's bill, let me just take you back. We submitted to the Speaker. He referred it to his legal office. They checked if it met all the requirements of the Constitution for a private member's bill, especially that it didn't impose financial costs on the consolidated fund. And then after that, a warrant was issued for us to proceed. That was sent for Gazette for 14 days. After the Gazette, it came back. Then it was presented on the floor of the House for first reading. After that, it was referred by the Speaker to the Constitutional, Parliamentary and Legal Affairs Committee. We have had a series of meetings with them. We've gone through what you would normally call winnowing and the back and forth, and amendments have been proposed. Some amendments proposed by the committee are supported by the sponsors. Some are not. Some will be subject of debate on the floor. And when that report is laid, which we hope should be laid this week before Friday, if that report is laid, it will then lead to the House having the second reading of the report or of the bill. The second reading of the bill will then engage the consideration of the amendments that have been filed by the committee, and then any other subsequent amendments that any member of parliament will want to file to the bill. Those amendments will be debated and voted upon. And once that is done, we're done with the second reading. Then there will be the third reading of the bill, which is basically ceremonial to announce that the bill is passed. So I anticipate that by Friday, we will have this report laid. And hopefully when Parliament reconvenes either end of June or early July, I think we should begin the second reading of the bill, which will have us look at all the fine details and amendments and then have it passed.
So the passage or rejection will not happen this time. It will happen in the next sitting of the House.
In all reality, it's impossible for us to debate the report and debate all the amendments in the next 72 or 96 hours. It's practically impossible.
The House is going on recess?
Yeah, our timetable, we are supposed to rise on Friday. As if that will happen, we are yet. But if you read a business statement from last Friday, the House is supposed to rise sine day on Friday.